Hey guys, Ron White here. Welcome to the Brain Athlete Show, the Brain Athlete Podcast. I don't know really exactly what we're going to call this yet, but it is the Brain Athlete Show for now. Brain Athlete's definitely staying in the name. We're brand new in doing this style of format here. If you're following my YouTube channel, you know I've had a different style of format. We're still going to keep those, but we're just kind of adding this into the mix, more of a conversational type thing, and this is going to be different. Sometimes I'm just going to be doing Q&A, and that's what I'm going to do today. A couple weeks ago, I sent out an email to my email list, and I said, hey guys, I'm going to do a podcast, and I'm going to answer your memory questions. What questions do you have about learning? What questions do you have about memory? What questions do you have about learning and memorizing things faster and better and more efficiently? Well, you guys did not disappoint. I've got stacks of pages right here just full of your questions. So if you have any interest in learning things faster, if you have any questions about memory and how to learn, I want you to listen. I hope you listen to this entire episode here. I will say this, that I'm going to, when this is all done, I'm going to go through and down below, I'm going to put each question that I'm answering here, and I'll put the timestamp. If you want to jump to a specific question, you can, but I think there is definitely value in just listening to this whole thing, because even if you look at the timestamp and you see, I don't really care about that question, I may say something in the answer that is not even related to that question that might help you with something else. So I hope you listen to the whole thing. Who am I? My name's Ron White. I'm a two-time USA memory champion. I used to hold the record for the fastest to memorize a deck of cards in the United States. I have a course called Black Belt Memory, which teaches you how to develop a black belt in memory. Like a black belt in Taekwondo, you get a black belt in memory. It's a really cool thing, and I'm biased, but I think it's the best memory course out there. If you click down below in the description, I'll have a link where you can get my black belt memory course. But on this episode of this show, or this podcast, I'm going to answer your questions about memory. So let's just dive right into it. What's the first one here on this piece of paper? Now, this was not the first question I got in chronological order as the emails came in. But I moved this one to the top, and I want to address it first because I think it kind of sets the stage here for memory. And here's the question. Ron, why do we need to memorize something if we can just look it up? Somebody said this to me recently at a party. You know, I was talking to them, and I said, yeah, she was a teacher. She said, you should come teach my students. And I said, yeah, I could teach them memory. And she said, why do we need to memorize something if we can just look it up? Well, this was a teacher talking to me. Now, I didn't really confront her on this logic, but what is she talking about? Does she let her students take the books into the test with them? Are all their tests open book tests? I mean, come on, you're a teacher and you're telling me why do we need to memorize something if we could just look it up? Well, unless you're letting your students look up every single answer in the test, memory is important for test taking. But it goes even deeper than that. And it goes even much more significant than that. There was a 4th century grammarian named Julius Victor, 1600 years ago. Let me quote what he said, and I want to get this quote perfectly correct. He wrote, "Memory is the firm mental grasp of things and words for the purpose of invention." Now let's dissect this for a minute. Julius Victor said memory is the firm grasp, mental grasp of things and words for the purpose of invention. I'm going to kind of explain what I believe he's saying here. And let me bring up another guy, Sir Isaac Newton. Sir Isaac Newton said, if I have seen farther than anyone before, it is because I have stood on the shoulders of giants. And what Isaac Newton was saying was that he was a scientist, and he had, discovered all these great things, it's only because the scientist who came before him, who laid the foundation. And here's what I'm going to suggest to you. This is how knowledge works. You learn something. You really know it. It's in your memory. Whether you sit down and memorize it, you really, really learn it. And then you'll be driving along in your car, or you'll be riding on an airplane or on a bus or on a subway or whatever, and you'll be thinking about that. And as you think about that knowledge that you already know, boom, another thought pops into your mind. And you're like, oh, man, I wonder if we could do this. Or I wonder if it could lead to this. I wonder if it could lead to this. Here's what I'm suggesting to you. If you never memorize anything because you can just look it up, well, here's your knowledge base. Your knowledge base is right here. It doesn't grow. And only when it grows, only when you really understand something, can your brain start working on that knowledge and start seeing that knowledge from different angles and twisting that knowledge around. And then when you do that, you invent something new. And then your knowledge is right here. Maybe you investigate this and you learn more about this. And even if you're not learning a memory system, you memorize facts about it just by doing it. Now your knowledge base has gone from here to here to here to here. Memory. There's some truth to saying you don't want to have just a bunch of useless facts in your brain. I get it, okay? I get it. You don't. But when you really, really memorize something, when you really, really know something, you're adding it to your knowledge base. You know it. It's your knowledge then. And then you can build on it, and you can expand on it, and you can invent new things. So I'm going to tell you this. The purpose of memorizing stuff is not just having something memorized so you don't have to go look it up. I mean, that's not the purpose. The purpose of memory is adding it to your knowledge base so you can think about it, so you can ponder it, so you can twist it around in your brain and add to it and add to it and add to it. It's so when you go do one activity and you're like, I can't figure this out. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute. That reminds me of this. Let's take a doctor, for example. A doctor who has been a doctor for 30 years. He has this knowledge base of all these diseases and all how the body works. Not because maybe he sat down and memorized it, but just over time he memorized it. He learned it. Then he is confronted with a new disease. If he never memorized anything about diseases, if he never memorized anything about how the brain works, his cognitive ability to figure out that new disease would still be right here. He'd be like, oh my gosh, this is a new disease. I have no reference point. I'm going to have to go look up and type in the symptoms. No. He says, oh, wait a minute. This reminds me of this. This reminds me of that. This kind of fits with this, what I already know. Maybe this would work. That's the purpose of memory. The purpose of memory is invention and reasoning and building knowledge. I get it. You might not want to just fill up your brain with useless facts, but to say, why should I memorize something when I can just look it up? That is a myth. That is the wrong way to look at memory. And I hope I've dispelled that, okay? All right. I'm not going to be as angry on the future questions, but that was the first question. Isaac Newton, if I've stood on the shoulders of giants, it's because if I've seen farther than anyone before, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. He had a knowledge base because of the men and women, the scientists who came before him. That knowledge base is what leads to invention. And that is important aspect of memory. Okay, let's move on before I spend the whole episode trying to answer this one question. Here we go. Mr. White. Thank you for calling me Mr. White, but you can call me Ron or Ronnie. My friends call me Ronnie. Dear Mr. White, personally, I think it would be cool to see the different memory systems available for memory training, including the major system, the memory palace training, and much more. I think this will give better insight of which choice is best for the viewer. Regards, Nick Van Vugt, V-U-G-T. Nick, you're right. There are several different techniques in memory. And I do like to teach all of them, or talk about all of them. Certainly I do in my black belt memory course. Here, let me give you just an overview of what he's talking about here. The memory palace thing that Nick is talking about is, I believe it's the most effective. I believe with hands down, bar none, without exception, it is the most effective memory system. When I compete in the USA Memory Championship, or I compete in the World Memory Championships, which I competed in the World Championships in 2009, as I'm talking to the other competitors, I would say 90% of them are using the Mind Palace technique. The Mind Palace technique is rather simple. It goes back at least 2,500 years. And the theory behind it is you memorize a map of a room. And then whatever you want to remember, you visualize going on around that room. So, for example, I might make number one the screen right here. Number two might be the microphone. Number three might be my table. Number four might be the window. And I would number spots around this room. And then if I wanted to memorize something, I attach the first thing I want to memorize. I visualize it on the TV. If it's a dog, I see a dog on the TV. If the number two thing I want to memorize is a pen, I imagine a pen on my number two location. That's the Mind Palace, and we're going to answer some more questions, and I'll explain how the Mind Palace works. I believe that is the most effective memory system because you can just see the room in your eye and just visualize it. There are other memory methods, such as the PEG system or the major system, which you can create a PEG system using the major system. And I don't want to get too deep into that, but here's the basic idea between the PEG system or even the major system. And that is you turn numbers into pictures. Let's use a real basic one. One, run. So you think of number one, my picture for number one is run, because one, run kind of sounds like each other. Two, shoe. They kind of rhyme. The number two, shoe, so your number two is a shoe. Three is a tree. Again, they rhyme. Three is a tree. Four is a door. Again, they rhyme. Four is a door. Using the same concept of the Mind Palace, instead of attaching the first word you want to memorize to a location in a room, you would attach it to one, run. So instead of seeing a dog on the TV, you would see a dog chasing you while you're running. For those of you watching the video version of it, you can see my dog shirt here. I'm just here to make friends. So that's called the PEG system, and it's a valid way to memorize. It certainly is. I think it takes a little bit more work, though. I think it takes a little bit more mental work. You have to go from, okay, number one, what's my picture for number one? Number one is running. What did I attach to running? And you got to kind of go through a mental gymnastics there. The Mind Palace, you don't have to do that. I think you can just look around the room and see the data. So personally, I use the Mind Palace more, but you could use the PEG system, and that is a PEG system. Another memory method that you can use is creating a story, linking items together. Let's take the same thing. Your number one's a dog, number two is a pen. So you see a dog running along, and he grabs a pen in his mouth, and maybe number three is water, so the dog jumps in water. Number four might be an airplane. He jumps out of the water and onto an airplane, and you create a story. You link stuff together. Now, that is a technique that actually I'm going to answer in a question later that we can actually use to memorize some advanced stuff. It's a good method. I think it's a good method if there's 10 or less items in that story. The flaw with it is you can't really say the data forwards and backwards. You have to start at the very beginning of your story and go all the way through your story to remember the points. So Memory Palace is one memory method. The PEG system is another. The story method is another. I think the Memory Palace has the least amount of flaws, but there are a lot of different ways to memorize. And I'm going to say this, I'm not going to spend too much more time on this question. Find what works for you. There's no right answer. There is no wrong answer on memory. It's the end goal that you're wanting. Are you able to remember the data? Does it work for you? I tend to revert to the Memory Palace a lot. If you don't know what the Memory Palace is, I'll put a link to the video that goes into a lot of detail on that, but I basically just told you what it is. Let's go to the next question. Janeth Happ, how to study notes from class and do spaced repetition to remember them? Okay, how do you study notes from class? First of all, let's talk about how do you take notes in class. You have a couple options here. You can write out the data on a piece of paper, or you can type it in a computer while your teacher's talking. There have actually been studies that show the people who write out their notes by hand while the teacher is talking remember more from the class than the people who are typing it into the computer. Huh, interesting. Why would you remember more if you're writing it out versus typing it into it? And we don't know. But we can take some guesses here, some educated guesses. One educated guess is when you are typing and you're typing in, there's a tendency to almost write it out word for word or type in more of what the teacher is saying. So you're focused on typing it word for word and you're just like a tape recorder. When you're writing it out by hand, maybe you can't write as fast as you can type. So you are forced to process the information a little bit more and say, okay, this is important, and you're writing out more of the bullet points and more what is important, discarding the filler words and that kind of thing. So there is some, and I think also maybe the act of writing actually maybe reinforces it in your memory too. Now, if you're conscious of this, if you're conscious of, hey, when I'm typing, don't type every single word and just do the bullet points, maybe you can get the same effect from each. Do your style. Do your style. But number one, take notes. There is research that shows if you write it out by hand, you will remember more of it. Don't try to write it out word for word, just the main points. Engage the teacher. Ask questions if you don't understand something. And here's another thing to do. Before you walk into that class, tell yourself this question, or tell yourself this statement. At the end of class, there's going to be a test. Now, there's not really, but you're telling yourself that to focus your brain. And when I go into a jiu-jitsu, sometimes I'll say, okay, I tell myself at the end of this, there's going to be a test. There's going to be a test. There's not really, but the test is this. When I get in my car, I have to recite what I learned, even just to myself. Here's something that you might do. Take notes in class, and then when the class is over, go outside, find yourself a place to sit, get another notebook, another notepad, and write down everything you can remember from the class that you wrote down without looking at your notes. What's that going to do? That is an active review. An active review. There's a passive review and an active review. An active review is where you don't look at your notes. You turn your notes upside down and you try to write out as much as you can remember. Why? Because if you review by just looking at your notes again, that's passive. You're not really engaging your brain. You're just reading it again. And there's a danger in this. And here's the danger. The danger is that you are going to trick yourself. You are going to trick yourself in, oh yeah, I know that. I'm just reading it. Yeah, I'm reading this again. I know that. Then you go in and take the test. And you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know this. If you're not looking at the notes and you're writing it out in this active review, you can't trick yourself. Either you know it or you don't. So take notes in class, maybe write them out by hand. Tell yourself there's going to be a test. The test is you writing out as much as you can after class. Spaced repetition was the second part of this. If you want something to go in your long-term memory, you're going to have to review it. If you were in a car accident 5 years ago, you could probably tell me exactly about it today, where you were, how it occurred, all the details of it. Why? Well, one is the action and the emotion of that car accident. Cements it into your memory. Your hippocampus says, this is valuable, this is important. We need to remember this. There's a lot of emotion to this. But there's another reason you remember it. You told that story of the car accident to your friend, to your mom. You told it to your boss. That's why you were late for work. You told the story several times. That review cements it into your memory. Spaced repetition, this is what I would recommend. Review it that night. The next day when you get up, you're taking a shower, you're brushing your teeth, see how much you can remember. Review it the next day. Review it in a week. Review it in a month. Go back and touch it. There's no right or wrong. There's no magic formula here. I'm not going to say you have to review it at the 12-hour mark and then the 24-hour mark and then the 48-hour mark. There's no right or wrong answer. But the right or wrong as far as a magic time frame. But I try to do it that night, the next day, a couple days later, a week later. Go back and touch it constantly until it solidifies in your brain. Think of your brain as you're a construction worker and you put down wooden forms on the ground, and then you pour concrete in there. The concrete hardens, you take the forms away, and the concrete stands there. Knowledge is the same way. You pour it into the wooden forms, which is your brain. You review it, 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 you review it. It hardens, it becomes knowledge, and you don't need the practice anymore, the repetition. It's just standing there by itself. You do need spaced repetition. That night, the next day, a couple days later, a week later, review it a month later. If you haven't thought about it in 6 months, go back and just see how much you can remember. There will be gaps. Fill in those gaps and try it again. That's how you make something knowledge. Ron, hello. This is from Chinmay Rajopati. Hello, could you please make a video on how to remember really hard trig and calculus formulas? It will help a lot. Thanks. So how do you memorize math formulas? Here's what I recommend that you do for this. The first thing is go through and look through all the math formulas or all the formulas for this subject. Let's say it's geometry. Well, you're going to see that there's a P in a lot of geometry formulas. It stands for perimeter. There's H in a lot of geometry formulas. It stands for height. There's R in a lot of geometry formulas. It stands for radius. These are called variables. Go through and look through all the variables. First thing, that's the first thing you have to do. Look at all the variables that commonly repeat. After you have determined all the variables that repeat, go through and create pictures for them. For example, I'd look at P and I might say every P for me is a pirate. Every R for me is a rat. Every H for me is a hat. And then you go back and you create stories. Your mind will remember stories. You might not remember 2 pi PW is the volume formula for a circular ring. All right, you might not remember circular ring equals 2 pi PW. What? Oh gosh, how am I going to remember that? Well, if every P is a pirate, if every W is a window, and every pi, 3.14, is a piece of apple pie, well, then you just look at the math formula and you're not seeing variables and letters and symbols. You're seeing a story. Oh my gosh, look at this story. There's a pirate with a circular ring. He is in a window. W. He's a pirate. P. Pirate, P, window, W, and you throw 2 pies in his face. So here's the story. There's a pirate, P. He is wearing a circular ring. He is in a window, and you throw 2 pies at him. Here's the math formula. Circular ring equals 2 pi, P, pirate, W, window. So here's what I'm going to tell you. The first thing that you need to do when dealing with math formulas, go through and look at all the variables, create pictures for the variables, and then just make a story out of it. If it's division, if it is perimeter divided by width, that might not even appear in a formula, but who cares? If it's division, perimeter divided by width, have a pirate standing on top of the window. If it's perimeter minus width, have a pirate taking the window. He's taking something away. If it's at addition, maybe have the pirate running and slamming into the window, P plus W. If it is multiplication, just have them standing beside each other, because that's how you do it in the math formula. So here's what I'm telling you. Create pictures for the variables, and then just create stories. Just create stories. This will work for 6-year-olds or 26-year-olds. I taught a guy who was probably in his 30s. He was a stockbroker. He said, Ron, I need to study for the stockbroker exam. I can't remember the formulas. The variables were things like cash. So we made it Johnny Cash. Capital, like money. We made it the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Bond, like a stocks and bonds. We made that James Bond. So the first thing we did is we created pictures for all the variables, and then we just created stories. If it was division, if it was bond divided by capital, it was James Bond standing on top of the Capitol building. Create stories, pictures for variables, and that's how you memorize math formulas. I actually have a video on how to memorize math formulas where I act some of this stuff out. I'll put it down below in the description. You might want to check that out. Ron, here's a question from Rabin Rimal. Personally, here's his question. I would request videos or articles on being motivated all the time. My motivation on any subject has a very short lifespan. That's why I'm still working on your black belt memory course. Thanks. Rabin, motivation is crucial. All right. It's the biggest problem all of us face. Let me go back to a Jim Rohn quote. Jim Rohn was a business philosopher. He was a friend of mine. He died about 15 years ago. But Jim Rohn said something, and it really stuck in my brain as far as motivation goes. He said, everybody's going to pay 2 prices. You will pay 2 prices. You can't avoid it. You cannot avoid it. The 2 prices that everybody will pay will either be the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. You're not going to be able to escape pain. So get it out of your brain. You're not going to be able to escape pain. Now let's go back to how this applies to motivation and what this means. Let's say that you're applying it to here to study subjects. Well, in regards to these subjects and these academic goals that you have a choice. You're going to pay the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. You will. You are either going to pay the pain of discipline by memorizing, by learning, by sitting down and investing 3 or 4 hours to learn the data. And that's a price you're going to have to pay. You are going to have to pay that price, sitting down and doing it. Now, you may say, well, Ron, I just don't feel like it. I'm just going to sit here and watch TV and eat Cokes and candy all day and goof off. That way I don't have to pay any price. Oh, no. Guess what? That ain't how life works. You're still going to pay a price. It's just going to be a different price. You're not going to pay the price of discipline. You're going to pay the price of regret. In a year, you're going to think, oh man, I wish I would have studied that. I wish I would have passed that test. I could have got a better job. I could have got the degree I wanted. I regret that so much. Now, here is the kicker. The pain, the price of discipline weighs ounces. It weighs something, but it's not that much. If once you get going, the pain of regret weighs tons. The pain of regret is going to make you depressed. It's going to make you anxious. It's going to make you sad. It weighs a lot, the pain of regret. The pain of discipline weighs so much less. So when you're trying to think, man, I just can't get motivated, ask yourself, what do I want to pay? Do I want to pay the price of discipline right now and just do it? Or the pain of regret? And it's going to be such a bigger price later. I'm also going to say this on this. Sometimes you just have to take that first step. I don't want to go to jiu-jitsu a lot. I never want to go to jiu-jitsu. I'm a 48-year-old, unathletic, fat man with a bad back. Okay? I never want to go. But when I get in there and I take that first step and I walk in the gym, I'm there. If I can get in the gym and take that first step, the rest just takes care of itself. So this is what I'm going to suggest to you. Just sit down and study, take that first step. And that's the hardest step. That's the hardest step. Ron, here's Hoda Eltop. Ron, please, I want a video on how to become a memory champion from the beginning, all the books you need, how many hours you need to practice each day, and useful techniques you use to become a champion. Thank you. Well, you don't really need books on how to become a memory champion. You just need to understand memory systems. I would recommend you have the Mind Palace. I'd recommend you have a different Mind Palace for every event. For example, on deck of cards, you get 2 chances to memorize a deck of cards. I would recommend you have 2 Mind Palaces for that event. And if you don't know what the Mind Palace is, and if you don't really know what I'm talking about, I'll put some links in the description. But again, it's just basically using a room. I had on numbers, how many numbers can you memorize in 5 minutes? You get 2 chances at that. I had 2 separate Mind Palaces, 2 separate houses mapped out. So have a different Mind Palace for every event. This keeps you from cluttering the data. That's the system behind it. But there's really so much more to being a memory champion or a champion in anything than just the system. You know, if you know how to throw a baseball, but you don't have the mindset of a champion, you might not make it to the major leagues, all right? So I think there is a lot of mindset and belief goes into becoming a champion. You see it all the time, or you don't see it all the time, but you see it sometimes. People have trained for something, an event. Maybe it's an Olympic event or it's a race or whatever, and they're about to win the race. You know they're going to win the race. They're in the they're 100 feet ahead of anybody else. And then what happens? They begin to doubt themselves. Oh my gosh, who am I? I can't win this race. I have all these struggles in my life. I'm not worthy of winning the race. The person 100 feet behind me, they've put in more work, and they're thinking, they're not consciously thinking these things, but they're subconsciously thinking it. And then what happens? You see it so many times. They trip and fall. They sabotage themselves, and then the person behind them goes and wins the race. I think the most difficult thing about being a champion is belief and mindset. Not believing that you deserve to win, but believing that you are worthy of winning. And that's one thing that I really worked on when I was training for the USA Memory Championship. Not believing that I deserved to win, not believing that I was entitled to win, but believing that I was worthy of winning. And you know what I did? I got a sheet of paper and I wrote out every success I had had since I was 12 years old. When I was 14 years old, I won the Spanish Award. When I was 15 years old, I got this base hit in a softball game. Whenever I was 16 years old, I took a job as a paper route, and I saved up enough money, and I helped pay for my own car. I listed out all my successes in life to convince myself, or not convince myself, but to remind myself, hey, I'm worthy of winning here. I have a history of winning. I am a winner. I've done a lot of positive things in my life, and I wanted to reinforce that belief in myself. Another thing that I did is I gave myself a routine. Every day I wanted to be training by 8:30. Every day I wanted to memorize for at least an hour or two a day, a minimum of an hour. And I did that every day. And so when I walked into that tournament 90 days after this intense 90-day training, in my mind, I'm like, wow, you have memorized a deck of cards 400 times or whatever it was. You have memorized numbers this many times. I put in the work. I documented the work. I wrote out how much I had done, and I reviewed it before I went into the tournament. You've memorized a deck of cards this many times. You've put in this many days of training, showing myself that, hey, you're a champion. You are a champion. And that's something that I really worked on, the mindset of a champion. Now, I'll tell you this. One day I didn't get up at 8:30. One day I slept in and I didn't memorize something. And I got on a phone call with my coach, T.C. Cummings. And he was a Navy SEAL. And he said, Ron, in the SEALs, when we don't do something we say we're going to do, we have to face a consequence. I said, a punishment? He said, no, a consequence. We have to do something to get it out of our mind, to wipe the slate clean. That way we're not out in battle and we're not second guessing ourselves and thinking, who am I? I can't even get out of bed at 8:30 in the morning. I said, what do I got to do, TC? He said, that's up to you. Find something that you really dislike and face it as a consequence. Well, it was 31 degrees outside. I jumped in the swimming pool at my apartment complex and I swam across it and I jumped out as a down and back as a consequence for not doing what I said I was going to do. And I'll tell you this, when I got out of that pool, I was not beating myself up at all for not getting up at 8:30. I had wiped the slate clean. I had got it out of my mind. So I think the mindset of a champion, just believing that you're worthy to win, reminding yourself that you're a winner, reminding yourself of your past successes was big for me. The training itself, I would train an hour a day, at least for the 90 days in advance. I think the most successful memory champions are spending an hour a day, sometimes year round, 5 days a week. But I did intense training the 90 days before. Hi, Ron. I'm a South African that would love to learn how to memorize a textbook word for word. I believe people with a photographic memory can only do this, or maybe that's in the movies. Hear what I would say on this, Emmanuel. I think photographic memories is a myth. I think that there's very few people in the world who have a true Rain Man photographic memory that can be proven. Maybe Stephen Wilshire, he's a guy worth Googling and searching. That guy may have a photographic memory, but it's so rare. The next thing I will say is, why do you want to memorize a textbook word for word? That is so much work. How is memorizing a textbook word for word going to help you? Unless it's a poem, or I memorized the United States Constitution, 4,543 words, word for word, because it's a historical document. But unless it's a poem or a historical document, don't memorize something word for word. It's not going to help you do any better on the test. Memorize main idea by main idea, point by point. Get this, I need to memorize it word for word out of your brain. It's a waste of time. It's not going to help. And plus, there's stuff in there that you already know. Why would you want to memorize it word for word if you already know it, if your goal is knowledge and to pass the test? Robert Sellers asked, learning lines for acting. More examples on monologues and scripts. It would be very useful to have a selection of different videos on this, different scripts, how to break down a script. Here's what you do for script. I worked with Topher Grace from that 70s show. I believe he was also Venom in the Marvel movies. Topher Grace and Nick Kroll, who recently was the host of Jimmy Kimmel's show, co-host. He stood in for him. I just recently saw that. So I worked with Topher and Nick on how to memorize lines. And here's what I suggested that they do. Number one, read the dialogue, read the script, read it once through to get it in your natural memory. Once you get it in your natural memory, then you just need to fill in the blanks. You need to fill in the blanks by memorizing the bullet points. Use the mind palace. Here, you want to memorize a Shakespearean play. To be or not to be, that is the question. I want you to see two bees on the screen back here, the first piece of furniture in your house. Two bees buzzing around. And then look at that piece of furniture and say to yourself, to be or not to be? That is the question. See a question mark on this microphone right here. Then go back. Here's what I'm telling you to do. Go to each line of the script. Create a brain trigger for that. Two bees buzzing around right there. And then say the words, say the script as you look at the furniture. To be or not to be? Then look at the next piece of furniture. There's a question mark. That is the question. Use the Mind Palace technique. Each line is a different piece of furniture. Look at that piece of furniture, see an image, but don't say the image. Don't say, I got two bumblebees there. Say the line of the script, to be or not to be. Don't say, question mark. Say, that is the question. Use the Mind Palace technique. Read the script through one time. Create bullet points for each line, and then walk around your house looking at the furniture, saying your script. And practice. And when you are practicing, don't read your script. Look at your furniture. Force your brain to come up with the lines. Ron, this is Thomas Clark. I would like to remember details from a verbal download given to me by my wife or fellow employees who says, you remember we talked about this yesterday when the details were spoken while I was multitasking. Personally, I communicate a load of details by email rather than speaking them. So let's see, here we go. Here's the bottom line. Thomas is wanting to know how to memorize conversations. Now, he addresses the first problem in his email. He says, I'm multitasking when I'm getting this information. Focus is the first key to your memory. Wherever you are, be all there. Focus on that person that is talking. That's the first thing. The second thing that I would do is, let's say maybe you're here at my podcast studio, and you say, hey, Ron, I really like the Dallas Cowboys, and my son, Matt, we're going to go to a game this weekend. He loves the Dallas Cowboys. That's a conversation, and it's a detail that I want to remember about you. Now, let's say that this is your blue car parked outside. That's your blue car right there, and I know that's your blue car. And so you say, I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan, and my son Matt and I are going to go. I create an image for that, and I attach it to something that reminds me of you. This blue car right here. So I imagine on that blue car is the Dallas Cowboys star, and you're throwing a football at the car. And who's driving the car? Some guy wiping his feet on the floor mat. Matt, your son Matt. And as I'm leaving the podcast today, I'll be thinking to myself, okay, he told me about his son, Matt, and that's why he's wiping his feet on the floor mat of the car. And they're going to the Dallas Cowboy game. There's a star on that. Every time I think about you, I'm going to think about that car and the story I created for that star and the football. So the next time I see you, I'll think, oh, there's Garrett. Garrett. Yeah, hey, Garrett. And I'll think back to that car and I'll say, tell me about the Dallas Cowboy game. I know you took your son, Matt. How did that go? And he's like, whoa, how did he just remember all that about me? It's because I took the conversation and I attached it to something that reminded me of you. And that's my best tip for remembering conversations. Let me skip through here real quick and answer some of the... Some people, here's a question. Some people, including myself, find it difficult. This is from Fadis Salibi. Some people, including myself, find it difficult to go over extensive content done in school or uni as well, keep up with homework, assignments, and exam revision. Therefore, it's very stressful to keep up with previous knowledge and build upon it. One idea would be for memorizing new and fresh information knowledge fast. Here's my best tip on this. Learn what the Mind Palace is. Learn what the Mind Palace is, and then constantly be building Mind Palaces. Essentially, what I'm asking you to do is number 10 or 15 pieces of furniture in your history classroom, number 10 or 15 pieces of furniture in your science classroom, number 10 or 15 pieces of furniture at your office, number 20 or 30 pieces of furniture at your friend's house, 20 or 30 pieces of furniture in your house. Constantly be building yourself a mental database of Mind Palaces. Even if you don't need them right now, because one day you're going to need them. And that's how you're going to be. When you need to learn something fast, if you have to build the Mind Palace out, it's going to slow you down. So just constantly be building Mind Palaces. Get yourself 100 or 150 locations. If you're wondering how to do that, I'm not trying to sell you my course, but I am trying to sell you my course because it helps you. Click the link down below and get my Black Belt Memory course. It'll walk you through that process. You'll build at least 100 locations in your memory. It's really, really great. Ron, this is from Mr. Mill Hill. Rashid. I'm trying to learn Arabic, but it takes me ages to encode a memory journey as I have to map out the phonetic strings of substitute words. By the time I complete one journey, I've forgotten the earlier one that I memorized. So I memorized everybody who died in the war in Afghanistan. There's two from the United States military. There's 2,400 of them. I memorized their rank, their first name, and their last name. It's 7,000 words. When I began this project, I significantly underestimated the amount of time it would take me to memorize it all. Why did I underestimate the time? I did not factor in how much time it takes to review. How much time it takes to review. Here's what I found. I have to memorize the first 50 people. Then before I add the next 50 people, the next 50 names, I have to go back and review the first 50. So imagine this. Imagine I'm at the point where I've memorized 800 names now. I have to go back and review that 800 before I add 50 new. In memory, in learning, if you are not going back and reviewing and making sure the information that you learned yesterday is solid in your memory before you go and add new information, you could be on a treadmill of just adding new information and not remembering the old information. In your study time, allow for review. Maybe it is at the beginning of the day, you review everything you learned prior, or maybe at the beginning of the day, you want to add new information because that's when your brain is the freshest. And after you add the new information, at the end of the day, go back and review not only the new information, but everything you learned before. But in your learning process, allocate time for review. Don't just allocate time for adding new information. Review is one of the most overlooked parts of the memory process, and that's why you're not remembering what you learned before, because you're not reviewing. That's my guess, at least. Let's see. I'm going to move this over here. Ron, are there any this is from Wilfredo Faticelli. Ron, are there any tricks to maintain focus throughout the day? And if so, how do I know when to relax? How do I memorize and how do you maintain your focus? I think you're going to maintain your focus through good nutrition and exercise. I'll be honest with you. I drank a little bit of caffeine this morning, and it gave me a boost. It gave me a boost of focus, but there is a tipping point for me with caffeine. If I start too much caffeine, it's going to start giving me brain fog and a little bit of anxiety, and it's going to totally defeat the purpose. I have to monitor my caffeine, and I do more water than I do caffeine. So I think good nutrition and exercise is going to help increase the stamina of your brain. I take an omega-3 pill every day, a multivitamin every day. This is to increase my stamina. But I also think it's foolish to think that you're going to be able to sit down for 5 hours and just study and get up. It's not efficient. Use something known as the Pomodoro technique. The Pomodoro technique says this: you study for 20 minutes and then you set a timer and you take a 5-minute break. You go back and you study for 20 minutes, you take a 5-minute break. You study for 20 more minutes, you take a 5-minute break. You study for 20 more minutes and then maybe you take a 30-minute break. But studying in bursts, boom! You know, most sitcoms are 20, 28 minutes after you take out the commercials, however much time that is. I think that's the attention span that we can really, really give. Movies are 2 hours, but but that's entertainment. I don't think you want to sit there and study for 2 hours straight. Study in spurts. Good nutrition and exercise. Get plenty of sleep. That's how you're going to maintain the stamina required for studying. Here's a question. Ron, I'm extremely curious. This is from Sean Success. I don't know if Success is his last name or not, but interesting. He says, I'm 24, currently interested in the United States Marines. I love diving into memory. I'm extremely curious on what extent you've applied your memory training to physical and complex activities. To clarify, I'm inquiring about the martial arts such as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and striking sports. So I actually did a program on how to memorize jiu-jitsu moves. I'll put a link down to that below, but here is kind of an excerpt from that course. The first thing I do to memorize jiu-jitsu or martial arts is I go into the class and I tell myself, look, we are just wanting to learn this. You not necessarily memorize point by point by point. You want to embody it. You don't want to be in the middle of wrestling and then try to be thinking about your memory palace. You know, you want it to just be natural. But I think there is a point where you can use your memory palace to learn jiu-jitsu or something. My coach, Juan Tatum, he really said, and he's not a memory expert, not a memory champion, but he's a very smart guy. And he said, Ron, what I like to do is break down jiu-jitsu moves into 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. For example, You get somebody in a move called side control, which is a jiu-jitsu position. He says, I think of 1, I need to put my hand here. 2, I need to put my hand here. And 3, I need to move my hand here. Next, I move to the next 1, 2, 3. I need to swing my leg over. I need to do this. Break moves down by 1, 2, 3. Memorize those 3. Then do the next 3. 1, 2, 3. Do it in chunks. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I think if you break it down into chunks and 1, 2, 3, there's a magic to that. It is going to help your memory process. We're just going to do a few more questions here. Ron, I'm interested in what type of, this is from Tariq Khan. I'm interested in what type of memory framework you can use to memorize summaries of books. I loved your black belt training. Thank you for that. And I look forward to more. So Tariq, how do you memorize summaries of books? And I think this should be the goal. The goal should be to memorize summaries of books, not word for word, unless it's a test and you still don't want to memorize it word for word. But you read a book and there's 5 great things that you learned from that book. Well, I have a Jeep. Maybe I read a business book and there's 5 things from that book that I just love. I'm going to tell myself my Jeep is where I'm going to store that data. I take the first thing that I learned and I see it on the front bumper. I think the next thing that I learned and I see it on the engine. The next thing I learned and I put it on the windshield. The next thing I put on the steering wheel. The next third thing I put in the passenger seat. I pick 5 things, I create images for them and then visualize them on my Jeep. Every time I think about that book, I think of my Jeep. The next book I read, maybe I take the 5 things and I imagine it around the swimming pool. I don't have a swimming pool, but my neighbor does. I take the 5 things that I imagine around my neighbor's swimming pool. That location, the swimming pool, stores the data for that book. So pick a location and take the 5 things you learned from that book and store them there. Every time you think of that book, you think about your Jeep. Every time you think about that book, you think about your neighbor's swimming pool. The 5 things that are happening in the pool, the 5 things that are happening in the Jeep. It'll help you memorize the summaries of books. That's a great technique there that I really do believe works. Just a few more questions here. Ron, how do you remember passwords and pins and usernames? Oh my gosh, this question is from Thomas M. I think it's from Thomas M. No, it's not. It's from Raspin Kavanov. How do you memorize passwords? Here's a trick to memorize passwords. You can create the most complicated password and never forget it. Let's say your favorite singer is Michael Jackson and you like his song, Man in the Mirror. I'm starting with the man in the mirror, right? Well, take the first letter of each one of those words. I, S, starting, W, with, T, the, M, man, I, N, T, the, M, mirror. And this is your bank account password, Chase Bank or whatever. In Chase Bank, when you walk in, visualize Michael Jackson singing, I'm starting with the man in the mirror. Then when you log into your Chase Bank account, just pick the first letter, just sing that song and type in the first letter. ISWTMITM. You'll never forget it. It's complicated. Nobody will ever guess it. It's complicated, but you also never forget it. If you actually saw Michael Jackson in your bank or whatever it is, your Hotmail account or whatever. Complicated passwords that you'll never forget. Pick songs and visualize that singer singing that song in the bank or whatever, and you'll never forget it. It's a great way to memorize passwords. How do I remember, Ron? Christopher Paulin says, how do I remember where I put things? That way, here's why you don't remember where you put your keys. Here's the bottom line. You don't remember where you put your keys because you're not paying attention. You walk into the room, you're thinking about this, you're thinking about that, you're thinking about your day, this person you're in a fight with, you set your keys down, and then 2 hours later, you need your keys and you have no idea where they're at. It's not because you have a bad memory. You weren't focused when you threw them down. Either number one, put your keys in the same spot every time, which is difficult to do if you're not thinking about it. Or number two, whenever you throw your keys down, imagine they're a bomb and they explode and they blow up the coffee table. So you're walking in, you're stressed from the day, you're thinking about all these things, you take your keys out, you throw them down, pause, take 1 second, you see the table exploding, and you go on about your day. When you need your keys later, you're like, what did I blow up? Oh yeah, I blew up the coffee table. That's where my keys are. Got to get out of here now. Okay. Let's find one last question. Let's make it a good one. Instead of picking one, I'm just going to give you one. Ron, is it true that anyone can improve their memory, or do you have to be born with it? Anybody can improve their memory. You don't have to be born with a special gift. I'm a 2-time USA memory champion, but I'll tell you this, I wasn't born with any special gift. I think some of the people I compete against were, they're geniuses, but I wasn't. You can be born with the gift of memory, but you can also be born a normal person and train it and enhance it to where you get to a very high level. If you want to train and enhance your memory, click the link down below. Get my black belt memory course. I have a free gift for you. It'll take you to the next level. It's exactly what you need to improve your memory. If you have a memory question that I didn't answer in this podcast, this show, and certainly you do. I didn't even get through all of your questions. We ran out of time. If you have a question, type it down below in the comments. I'll take a note of it, and I'll do this again, and I'll answer your questions. So ask a question, put it down below in the comments. One thing that tells YouTube and other platforms that this is good and worth sharing is if you like it, if you share it, if you comment, if you engage with it, it tells the computer algorithms that this is good and other people should do that. So I hope that you engage with it in that way. I hope you're enjoying this new format. My name is Ron White, and I look forward to hearing your name. Comment below so I know your name. Comment below and ask questions. And in the next video or in a future video, I'll answer it. I'll see you on the next lesson.